Yeah, alright guys, how's it going? I'm Paul Campbell, a videographer, photographer, currently based in Melbourne. And just after last week's video, just to clear a little thing up, I'm not actually Irish, I'm actually Scottish. You will not believe how many times it actually keeps coming up in this country. To me, it sounds nothing alike.
What doing, Willie? I'll turn your groin to pudding.
Oh, you speak like a poet, but you punch like one teeth.
Oh, you bastard!
Maybe our dialects are more similar than I thought. It has been a week and a bit. Sorry I didn't put out a video last week. I was trying to do it behind the scenes of this commercial that I'm shooting, but it didn't work out. So it kind of set me back a week. So after the last week's video, guys, I got an overwhelming positive response about the cinemagraph that I made. And I didn't dive too deep into it. But after the positive response, I put it out to Instagram to see who would like to learn how I actually made this particular one. And I was blown away again. There was so many of you that actually wanted to learn. So I thought this week I can take you through step by step of how I made it and how you can make your own. So before we jump into it, these are just my techniques. There are a multitude of different ways you can go about creating a cinemagraph. It all depends on the style you're after, the overall result you want in the end, and to be honest, how much effort you can be bothered putting in. There are simple ones that are just videos that are just look back. There's more complicated ones that include After Effects and actual animating. So this is the halfway point between putting a decent amount of effort in and getting the best results. So I've obviously made one previously because you've all seen that, you all wanted to know how I made it. I'm going to walk you through the things you need to have in mind while taking the photos, and then we're going to jump into the computer. You're going to need a few things to get started. You're going to need a camera that preferably shoots in burst mode, a tripod or some way of stabilizing your camera, and a remote. And if you don't have a remote, you can just have a family friend or whoever you're in quarantine with to push the shutter down. Those are the three main things you're going to need. The technique that we're actually going to be using today is a burst lapse. You're like, Paul, what the hell is a burst lapse? A burst lapse is basically a combination of taking a burst of photos and a time lapse slapped together. Basically, we're going to have our camera on the highest possible burst mode, holding our shutter down until our buffer runs out. Basically, until your camera tells you you cannot take any more photos until it catches up, writing them to card. That is basically it in a nutshell. I'm going to take you through how I made this cinemagraph. Your lighting setup and your camera composition could be completely different. Your objects you're going to have moving can also be completely different. In this technique, we're not going to be adding any elements in Photoshop or After Effects or Premiere Pro. The things that are going to be moving in frame are all in camera. So the first step was setting up my scene. I set up my camera in the rough composition that I wanted to have. I wanted to be directly in the middle of the frame, so I hung all my Polaroids around me at very different lengths and distances from the camera to give some out of depth element, get my desired effect. We want full control over our settings, so we're going to switch to manual mode. As far as your aperture, shutter speed and ISO go, these are all going to be variables that are going to change depending on the lighting scenario and desired effect you're after. I had my aperture 2.2 because I wanted some nice out of depth elements. I had my shutter speed at 100 because I was going for a janky motion feel. And then I just had my ISO at around 640 just to correctly expose the image. So the only setting there that you need to pay attention to is the shutter speed. For the burst lapse effect to actually work, we need to break the 180-degree shutter rule. I'd love to go more in depth about this, but that's not really what this tutorial is about. I'll link a video in the description that can explain all that. All you need to do now, and just before my girlfriend held down the shutter button until the buffer ran out, I gave the Polaroids a quick knock so they start swaying and they got into position. So you might want to do this a few times so we're not jumping between our camera and Lightroom. To give you an idea if this is actually working, all you need to do is go to the back of your camera and start scrolling through all your photos real quick, and you should see the animation starting to play out. So guys, that's basically it. We're going to ingest our photos into Lightroom now, or whatever editing program you're using, and then we're going to go ahead and start editing. Bonus tip guys, in between each set of photos, each time you run that buffer out, I want you to hold up your hand to the camera and take a photo. And that means when we get into Lightroom, we know which photos belong to each set because they're all segregated by a blank frame. Process all this, we're going to be using Lightroom and Premiere Pro. If you're using different editing softwares, that's completely fine. The methods stay pretty much the exact same. Little change of location. So guys, now we're going to ingest all our photos into Lightroom. I would separate each batch of photos, each burst lapse you have, into their own separate folder. It just helps navigate and edit everything a little bit easier. As you see, I've got everything in here in Cinemagraph Tut. So I've already edited my image. Quickest way to apply your same edit to multiple photos, edit your first image of course. Have your first image selected, scroll all the way to the end, holding shift and selecting them all. And then you can just hit this little synchronize button, make sure everything is selected, and hit synchronize. That's going to go ahead and do its thing. If you want to get a little preview of what your cinemagraph could look like, what we're going to do, once everything's edited, we're going to jump back into the library mode. We're going to have our first image selected, and then we're just going to hold down the arrow key. It's just going to play it through, and it gives us a little insight to what our cinemagraph could look like. Now that we've edited our image, we just need to get ready for export. So we're going to have all our images selected, hold Control Shift and E. It's going to bring up our export window. Our batch of photos into their own separate folder just makes everything a little bit easier. I'm going to have this here, custom named sequence. And this is going to put all our images into a numerical order. It makes everything a lot easier when we're importing to Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro doesn't like dealing with massive file sizes. So what we're going to do is have this resize to fit. We're going to have short edge selected. And then the shortest edge is going to be 1000 pixels wide. Have a resolution at around 72, and that'll be perfect for Instagram. We're going to go ahead and export, and that's just basically done with Lightroom. We can go ahead and close that now. Cool. We're going to jump into Premiere Pro, and we're going to bring this all together. The things you're going to need is your image sequence, a music clip, and maybe some sound effects to spice everything up a little bit. I've obviously made mine before, but I'm going to run you through how exactly I made mine. As you see, I've already got all my elements. All you need to do is really import these into Premiere Pro. To get your image sequence in properly, whilst you're in your bin, right click, import, navigate to where you have saved your images. With your first image selected, you're going to make sure you have image sequence, and that's going to bring your images in a nice little file. You're going to hit open, and you're going to be given a file like this. So we're going to be working in a 24 frame timeline. This is going to get the longest possible duration out of our cinemagraph. But Premiere Pro is a little bit weird, and it thinks it doesn't have a set frame rate. It's going to bring it in at 30 frames. So the easiest way to change this is you right click on your image, pop up to modify, hit interpret footage, and I've already changed mine, but you need to change it to 23.976. So you want to go ahead and drag that into your timeline, and that should be your entire timeline set up. Now if you play this through, now this is only like 3 seconds long, so we want this to be at least 3 times as long. I want it to be just about 11 seconds, I think. We're going to have our sequence selected, holding Alt, drag along to duplicate it, and we got this little jump here. Simplest way to get rid of that is right click on your image, speed and duration, reverse speed, and boom. If we let this play out, we can see there is no jump and it plays perfectly. So we could actually just play this through, we could export it, upload it to the gram, and we'd be done. We'd get all the likes, it would look amazing. There's a few extra elements we could add to take it to the next level. That's what I did with mine, and I kind of want to walk you through those. Gonna need a sound effect and a music clip. First of all, I want to make this even longer, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my first clip, holding Alt, and drag that along. And that's going to give me around 11 seconds, which for me is perfect for this cinemagraph. So because this is a portrait themed portrait cinemagraph, I want to add in those camera elements to kind of bring it to life and make it more whole. So as you can see, I've got this camera sound. If we play that, I'm going to take that audio clip, I'm going to place it around 3 times around where I want it to be. Again, I've done this, as you can see, this is pretty much pre-made all over here, but we're going to do this again. So I'm going to take my music clip, I'm going to drag it all the way over here, play that through. And that's looking pretty decent. And this is basically where we're going to leave the tutorial. You can copy this a few times, export it for Instagram, upload it, and boom, that is you done. I'm not going to take you through all the export settings because that's not what this tutorial is about. I just wanted to show you exactly how I made this cinemagraph. Now what I will say guys is the only extra things I've added in my final one is a little flash animation to play when the camera sound goes off. Play that through for you now. So that guys is basically how I made that cinemagraph. I really appreciate you all reaching out and asking me actually how I made it. It gives me more content to make. But how about we jump back over to the desk and wrap this video up. A little bit in depth, I know. I know there's a few steps to it, but once you do this a couple of times, you will be a pro at it, I promise. I'm sure you all did fantastic if you were following along. If you have any issues when creating your own or any questions, just hit me up on Instagram. I'll be happy to help you along. That's it for me. If you got some value from this video, please consider liking and subscribing, even commenting, doing all those beautiful YouTube things. But until next time guys, peace.